Welcome, friends. Today, I'm going to share a heartwarming story about how a small act of kindness can transform lives. I hope you enjoy it. Sarah Williams wiped the sweat from her brow as she finished arranging the last of the milk bottles on her makeshift stand. At 38, the years of toil on Greenfield Farm had etched lines of weariness on her face. Life had been kinder once, back when the farm paid its workers fairly, before economic hardships forced the owners to cut wages, leaving Sarah and her fellow villagers to fend for themselves. The once thriving farm now barely supported the workers, forcing them to hawk their goods by the roadside just to make ends meet. Sarah looked around, noticing she had arrived later than usual. The prime spots near the road were already taken by other vendors, leaving her stand farther back where fewer customers would see it. She needed a good day of sales to afford the materials for repairing her leaky roof. Her neighbor, Jack, had agreed to help, but he couldn't provide the supplies for free. "Lord, please let me sell it all today," Sarah whispered as the sun climbed higher in the sky. An hour passed, and Sarah watched enviously as customers flocked to the stalls nearer the road. The steady stream of buyers eventually slowed to a trickle, then stopped altogether. Sarah flagged down a few cars, grateful for the small sales, but her optimism faded as the afternoon dragged on. She had sold half her stock, but that wasn't enough to cover the cost of repairs. As she began to lose hope, a bus pulled in. A young boy, no more than 12 or 13, leaped out and ran to the driver, pleading with him in an animated conversation. The driver, however, shook his head firmly and eventually closed the doors, driving off and leaving the boy sitting dejectedly on the curb. Sarah recognized him as Danny, a lad from the village a few miles down the road. Her heart ached for him as she saw the tears welling in his eyes. Minnie Johnson, the only other vendor still around, was loudly hawking her scandalous tabloids to the last few passers-by. The sight of the lonely boy tugged at Sarah's heartstrings, and she made a decision. Grabbing a bottle of milk and a packet of cheese pancakes from her stand, she walked over to the boy. "Here, sweetie, you look hungry," Sarah said kindly, holding out the food. The boy looked up, startled. His eyes, a mix of suspicion and hunger, hesitated before he took the offering. "Thank you, ma'am," he mumbled shyly. "What's your name, son? And what are you doing out here all alone?" Sarah asked, lowering herself to sit beside him. Between mouthfuls, the boy told his story. His name was Danny Greer. His parents had split up the year before, and his mother had moved them in with her relatives in the village. Things were fine at first, but the relatives started drinking and arguing, sometimes even hitting him. This morning, after hiding in a shed all night, scared to go inside, Danny decided to run away to his father's house. But when he tried to get on the bus, the drivers refused to let him ride without any money. "I know the way, though," Danny said, his voice trembling slightly. "Get to the station at the end of the line, then go left across the highway." Sarah's heart broke for the young boy. She only had $30 from today's sales, barely enough for her own needs, but she couldn't bear the thought of this child hitchhiking along the open road. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out a crisp $20 bill, the price of a ticket to the end of the line, and pressed it into Danny's hand. "Here, honey, you get yourself home to your daddy safe now, you hear?" she said, her voice firm but gentle. Danny's eyes widened, and without warning, he threw his arms around Sarah in a quick, fierce hug. Spotting the final bus of the day pulling in, he jumped up and sprinted toward it, calling a heartfelt, "Thank you," over his shoulder. As the bus merged onto the highway, a small hand thrust out a window, waving wildly. "I won't forget, Miss Sarah. I'll see you again. I promise." Sarah waved back, her heart swelling with a mixture of hope and sadness as the bus disappeared around the bend. Little did she know how that simple act of kindness would shape her future. Years passed, and the weight of life continued to bear down on Sarah. Now 53, her face had grown more weathered, her hands more calloused from years of unrelenting labor. The farm had changed drastically, with new management prioritizing profits over people. Sarah found herself pleading with Michael Torrance, the new farm manager, for help. She had worked at Greenfield Farm for 35 years, never missed a day, and had always done her part. But Michael was unmoved by her loyalty. "Sarah, times have changed," Michael said, leaning back in his leather chair, an infuriatingly smug smile on his lips. "It's all about market forces now. Bottom line is, nothing's free. You want something, you've got to have something to trade. And frankly, what exactly are you offering?" Sarah's frustration boiled over. "How about loyalty, Michael? Dedication? I've given my life to this place, and this is how you repay me? Do you think Mr. Greenfield would approve of you turning away his longest-serving worker in her time of need?" Michael's eyes narrowed. "Now you listen here, you sile old bat. Mr. Greenfield's got bigger problems than one washed-up farmhand whining for a handout. Why don't you run along and let the adults worry about business?" Trembling with rage and humiliation, Sarah turned on her heel. "This isn't over, Michael. I won't let you treat folks this way." As she stormed out of the office, tears pricked at her eyes. She blinked them back, determined not to let Michael see her cry. But as she walked through the parking lot, the weight of her situation bore down on her. What would she do now? How could she survive? "Sarah, honey, what's wrong?" Margaret Davis, Sarah's former co-worker and nearest neighbor, hurried over, concern etched on her face. Sarah collapsed into Margaret's arms, her emotions finally breaking free. Through heaving sobs, she told Margaret about Michael's cruelty and the injustice of a lifetime of service being tossed aside like yesterday's trash. There, let it all out," Margaret soothed. "Then we'll get you home and check your blood pressure. Don't want you stroking out over that heartless bastard." Leaning on Margaret for support, Sarah made her way to Margaret's rusty pickup truck. They rode in silence through the dusty countryside, each lost in memories of better times. As they pulled up to Sarah's ramshackle house, they noticed a sleek black Mercedes idling in the driveway. Two men stood beside it, an older gentleman in a crisp business suit and a younger man in well-worn jeans and a button-down shirt. The younger man locked eyes with Sarah, a slow smile of recognition spreading across his handsome face. "Aunt Sarah," he called, striding toward her. "It's me, Danny Greer, from the bus stop. Remember?" Sarah stared in shock as the well-dressed man approached. Memories of the scared little boy from the bus stop flooded her mind. Tears welled in her eyes as she clasped his hands. "Danny? Is it really you? What on earth are you doing here?" Danny grinned and pulled Sarah into a warm hug. "I made a promise, Aunt Sarah. I said I'd see you again, and I meant to keep it. It just took me a mite longer than I planned." He gestured to the older man. "This here's my daddy, Samuel. He's the one who helped me track you down." Samuel stepped forward, removing his hat. "Mrs. Williams, it's an honor. Danny's told me what you did for him all those years ago. I can't thank you enough." Flustered, Sarah waved them inside. Come in. I'll put on some tea. You must be parched from your trip." As Sarah busied herself in the kitchen, Danny and Samuel looked around the small house. Signs of disrepair were everywhere: peeling wallpaper, leaking ceilings, and the musty smell of aged wood. They exchanged a concerned glance. Seated around the rickety dining table with steaming mugs in hand, Sarah apologized for the state of her home. "I'm sorry it's not much. It's hard to keep things fixed on my salary, or lack of one lately." Danny leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean, Aunt Sarah? Doesn't the farm help with repairs after all your years there?" Sarah let out a humorless laugh. "The farm? They ain't even paying us regular these days. It's every man for himself, just about." Samuel's brow furrowed deeper. "That can't be legal, not paying earned wages. Something's not right here." He and Danny shared a long look before Danny spoke. "Aunt Sarah, Daddy and I were planning to stay in town for a couple days, visit some old friends. You think we might could impose on your hospitality?" Sarah beamed at the idea. "Impose? Danny, you're welcome in my home anytime. I've got a spare room. Not much, but it's clean." As Sarah puttered around getting the room ready, Samuel pulled out his cell phone. "I know a couple of attorneys in this area," he muttered, "and I want to get their thoughts on this farm situation." Over the next few days, the house buzzed with activity. The father and son duo had taken it upon themselves to start fixing up Sarah's home, enlisting the help of local contractors. Meanwhile, Samuel quietly gathered evidence of the farm's malpractices, putting together a case that would soon expose Michael Torrance's crimes. Michael's arrogance had led him to take risky shortcuts, skimming funds from workers and siphoning profits into his own pockets. But his downfall came when Samuel and his legal team exposed his wrongdoing. Greenfield Farm was investigated, and Michael was arrested, leaving the workers relieved and hopeful for the future.